Welcome to another episode of Resilient and Rising. So, today's episode is going to be a little different. I wanted to kind of make this podcast be more of like a storytelling, guys. So, kind of like go back to like where I started. So, today's episode is going to be about codependency because that's where I started. um, so, just to share a little bit of like how this started 2 years, almost 2 years ago, I pretty much was in obviously married and going through a lot of like questioning within myself, like why was I the way that I was? Because I was very impulsive, very toxic in the marriage. So whenever I would do something, and this platform and this podcast within itself is going to be very raw and honest, very authentic. So back then in the marriage that I was in, I would react in ways that were very destructive. So whenever I wouldn't get what I want, like a child, I would kind of like rip the clothes off that he had, or like kick him out the house, or like scratch his car. Like the Latina in me kind of came out, and then it kind of the toxic things, the petty things.
Yeah.
But I didn't know at the time that it was just a cry for help. Like my inner child was just wanting love, right? So the relationship was just very toxic. And whenever we would try to like make up, he was like, "You're a really good person on the inside. I believe in you." And I was like, "But this is truly who I am." But I didn't know why I would go on these, like, we would fight every weekend, why I would kind of react the way. I never knew why. I knew something was wrong. So I started going back to childhood memories, doing a lot of introspection. And because the marriage got worse and worse and worse, uh, usually from now, like being a coach and helping people, the person that's codependent is the one that actually goes out and looks for help, as in like a therapist or like a coach or something, because they don't want to let go of that relationship. So that's what I did. I was like, okay, let's get marriage counseling. Let's try to fix this. I want to save my marriage. And the first thing when we went on the like the introduction with the therapist, it was like via like online. After that, we sat down, and he was literally like very loving in the in the consultation, like kind of rubbing on my leg, like everything's gonna be okay. So that was like just a complimentary call of like going over questions, and then the next session he didn't show up, so I was like, I'm gonna continue to do this by myself because I wanted to heal. I wanted someone to hear me. So at that time, the first thing that she said to me after the session that we had, because I was sharing like all of my childhood memories with this girl, and she was like, "I want you to read this book. It's called Mia Melody, I think is the author, and the book was called Codependency." And I was like, "Okay, I'm going to read this book right now." So I started to like learn that everything that I was dealing with had a reason, because I thought I was crazy. So after the fact of like a couple sessions, I started to be like more aware that there is such thing as boundaries, that there is such thing as childhood trauma, and I made the choice because of everything just coming at me, like more infidelities that I was allowing, and my family, my mom and dad. I was like, okay, let's do something, because I couldn't continue to be in that space of suffering anymore. So I was like, let's just let mom and dad go. I established boundaries. They didn't respect that. Um, Lost my job within that situation because I was working for my dad at the time. And then the marriage after that was crumbling. I was being like cheated on during the time of my birthday. So at that time, I was just like, let's let everything go. I can't do this anymore. But it took pain for me to get out of that. So now going back, learning like what was I actually needing at the time was just love. And I'm sure you guys can like see like there is such a desperation within us when we don't really realize that love is actually within us, right? That you're so like it. I don't think that that was love. I think that was more like an obsession. Like I was obsessed with this person, with the relationship, with the dynamic of the hot and cold type of like relationship, that it was literally like my mom and dad's relationship. And I was just like, no, I'm better. Like, this is not like my mom and dad. I was in denial. Like, do you think, um, like, you have to share my story, women get more affected with codependency or men too? Like, because when it comes to attachment styles, we don't just have one attachment style. We can have like, we can be avoidant at times, we can be anxious attached to the person. But how do you guys deal with that? Like, what type of instances that you guys have had when it comes to codependency?
So yeah, codependency for me, started at a very young age, and how it began was my parents were, typical, Indian type of parents where they weren't really that emotional, and that's because they were taught to be a certain way by their parents, and so they felt like that's the best way to raise their children or their child. And so being born in the States, I was a really happy-go-lucky kid, and so I needed a more expressive love where they would tell me like, Nick, we love you, Nick, hugging me all the time, those types of affection is something that I realized only later on in life that I needed. But I didn't necessarily receive that. And my parents, they obviously loved me, and it's just they were raised a certain way to show love, and so they just showed that love to me. And a lot of times, it was, I thought, based on my academic performance or my performances in any type of field, um, I would get feedback in a way that would be like, you got to do better now. So that's how my like perfectionism started coming out into play. At that time, I can't really process rejection or abandonment, but clearly what had happened was that when I wasn't getting that love that I needed from them in the manner that I needed it, which is a very secure, open, expressive type of love, then I started seeking that love in others. And whether that was consciously, but more likely unconsciously, as I grew up, it started in high school where I, started dating somebody. And it might not even been a line that I really wanted to date somebody at that time, but what I was looking for was someone to love me or express their love to me, if that makes sense. And then it started to feel good, right? Like I was like, yeah, my first girlfriend, like, yeah, we're spending all this time together. It feels so good. I just wanted to spend time with her all the time because I knew going home at the time, I wouldn't get that same love that I was getting from my girlfriend at the time. And so what happens with that is that you develop this like clinginess. And what's going on in your brain is that once you get that rejection at home, your body goes into this fight or flight mode. You feel like, oh my God, where am I getting this love from? Or how do I stop this rejection feeling? And so you relay that on to somebody else, and you go and start attaching that need with a relationship or a friend or whoever you're confiding in or wanting to spend time with. You start seeking that in an unbalanced way, I would say, if that makes sense, right? And so then when we broke up, then I didn't spend any time healing. My codependency issues then started kicking up even more. Like, oh my God, I just felt rejected and abandoned. Let me go and get with another girl. Then I got with another girl, and I was with her for 5 years straight. There was no time in between for any kind of being single, being independent, because once that trauma had struck at a young age of like not getting the love that I needed, and then I started seeking that in other individuals, and then getting in these long-term like relationships that would come one after the other, because when I was alone, even for like a week or two, my body would start like reacting to that and being like, you need to find comfort, you need to find comfort. And I just didn't know how to find that comfort in myself at that time period. I didn't know how to take time to heal from one relationship to the other. My fight or flight system kicked in, which causes you to have a little brain fog. And again, our bodies are so used to comfort, our ego is used to comfort. We'll just jump into a relationship because it feels good. It may not be aligned with what we're trying to accomplish at that time, which likely would be better off being single. Nope. We got to have that person to validate us and to make us feel good, because that's going to help us, get further in life, in our careers, in our personal journey. We need that validation from somebody else.
I like what you said about clingy because I remember when I used to date guys, and it's crazy that you said that too, that whenever you date somebody, then you go to the next and then the next, and there's really no gap. You just, it's like a drug, right? You go back on the dating app and you're gonna like, let's
Drug.
go, let's do it again. Like, I feel like I'm ready.
It's an
But
addiction.
I think, yeah, like back then I didn't have the awareness
Yes.
that this was happening, and I thought it was normal. I think also there is a big rise in mental health within the past recent years that back then there wasn't much. So I was just like, this is normal. I feel like some months pass, I'm gonna go and talk to somebody else. Or in the time frame that I was going through the breakup, I would talk to people that I used to know and get that validation, like you're pretty and you're beautiful, and like my ego kind of like
Yes,
grew,
yes,
like
stroking the ego. I get that. I completely. That's so funny you said that. That's me as
so
well.
that was what I would do. And another thing too, codependency, and this is not to generalize women or men, but I think because of society, what I did in my relationship was that I would push down upon based on like the social standard that I have a daughter with, because I have two kids with I have two kids in general, but the first father was not involved. And when I met my ex-husband, obviously we had my daughter Bella. So when I met him, I had this idea in my mind that, like, the white picket fence American dream life, like first get married
Yep.
and then have a child. But then once I had a child, I'm like pushing, like, so how many days are you going to propose, like, and I would joke, but what I would do is try to manipulate, like, when are you going to propose, like this is happening, like this is like I already told you what I wanted. I want to have a family, we have a family, but it's not solidified based on this paper that I needed to. But what I wanted was not the marriage in itself, but you really are seeking is security, but not security within a title or a marriage, like being married or to your partner, security within yourself. But I didn't have the awareness back then, but I would be very manipulative with, and even though I thought that my intention was great, because a lot of people and even my clients too, like, oh, I'm a people pleaser, or I am codependent, or I'm very loving and clingy, you think that your intention is great, right? That I'm doing good. But when you really dig deeper into it, there's an intention behind what you're doing, which is manipulative because you're changing or altering the other person's actions based on what you want. And that is manipulation. So when people have the awareness of that, when you do a lot of introspection, they're like, shit, like I am manipulative, right? Like it's a huge wake up call because you're looking at yourself in the mirror instead of like judging the other person, like, what the terminology that we use now, they're a narcissist.
Yeah.
So that's what I did in the beginning. Like I didn't realize. And that's why like a lot of people like, am I the narcissist? Is he the narcissist? Like, what if we were all narcissists? Like we all have traits.
We do.
Doesn't mean you have to like label somebody, but another thing that you said, because you took your story back to your childhood, and I remember because recently this came up within a breath work that I did with, because the new moon really messed me up lately.
Yeah.
So I was and this is like a further episode later on because I want to share what has happened recently in my life, but something came up based on childhood and feeling not safe or secured, because that wounding we will keep touching certain wounding so we can heal deeper and deeper and deeper. So within this breath work, towards the end, there was a inner child meditation, and it brought me back to a memory when I was about 3 or 4, and it was me crying and throwing myself on the ground, like hyperventilating because my mom was going to work. And, you know, there is this thing that, because as children, we want our parents. I mean, we were in their mommy's belly for like 9 months, right? So we want to feel like our parents are our safety. And when every child is different, but when we're not provided with safety, or our parents, like, my mom had to work a lot because in Peru, like, you need to work to survive. And I would stay with my grandpa. But I would remember, and my mom would always mention after the fact, and I didn't really understand much of it. I just thought it was a silly story, how much I really needed as a child. Like, my needs were not met. And we all have different needs, but when those needs are not met, then you are pretty much in survival, and you live that way because you're missing that. So going back as this version of me into that meditation, really giving myself like that love, like the hug and the visualization, I felt so sad for her, because like, I sometimes we don't see ourselves from a third person perspective, but like, she really needed love, she needed mom there. And it may be silly, like, okay, you got to understand that your mom is going to work, but a child doesn't really understand that. So it develops your behavior later down the line, like how you are, why you do the things that you do, why do you need certain things in a relationship? Because a lot of our love language is based on our childhood woundings that we did not get as a child. Like you said, I needed affection and words of validation, encouragement. So I'm sure that you have words of affirmation and touch as your your needs in a relationship, right? Because you didn't get that as a child.
That's right.
So how do you, like, now that you have this awareness, right, that you didn't have those needs met, when you go into a relationship, or like when you are clear with what you want now, do you still seek the same things that you were missing as a child in a relationship, in a partner?
Yeah, it's a great question. I ever since I've started this healing journey, I have been, working on my codependency issues so much so that it's been a year and a half, and I have not gone on a single date. But it's taken me that long to really delve into, what my issues really were, to have that introspection that I needed to go through and see how my childhood was like, and why did I end up a certain way. Because as a child, we are all very pure and very loving individuals, right? We just want love, and we just want to be surrounded by love, and we just want to have fun, and so along the way, our views get a little jaded. We are traumatized throughout life, and then that pure version of us, and I'm speaking for myself, but I got away from that. Like, I was no longer that pure version of myself, even though inside I thought that I was. But because of my codependency issues, I realized, like you mentioned, that I was being very manipulative in those relationships. There was even like infidelity in my relationships, and it was all because I wanted control. And I wanted control because I didn't want to lose what I had, that emotional attachment with that individual. And so that caused me to try to do things to make sure that relationship would at least stay together, at least through a certain phase, until I felt like I was ready to leave that relationship. And so, oftentimes, I think we end up staying in relationships much longer than we need to, because we are afraid to be alone. Our ego is afraid to go out into the unknown. And when am I going to find somebody else? And this is good enough, it seems like. And oh, it's that time. I'm 30 some years old. I should be getting married. So all those thoughts start creeping into our brain that make us go back into those same karmic cycles, or go back to something that you feel is comfortable, even if that comfortable is toxic, right? But it's a known toxic. So, to answer the question, you know, after I've gone through this healing process and understanding the past year and a half, going into a new relationship, I certainly want what I call a secure very emotionally intelligent relationship where there's open expression about emotions, where we're discussing about our sexual needs, where we're discussing about, how can we both create our independent lives, but kind of work together so that both of us are ascending to our highest self. Because I think there's a lot of power in that. And that this time around would cause for me to have a more grounded and conversational approach, which in the past I never had. I was a very avoidant with my own emotions, even though I was seeking those emotions from other people. But it's because my parents were avoidant with their emotions, right? So it was like, oh yeah, that's the reason. Like all these girls used to ask me, Nick, why don't you just talk about your emotions a little bit, or how do you feel, like blah blah blah, all these different things that come up. And it's only now after doing the introspection that I realized I was being avoidant with them because my parents were being avoidant with me. So even though I was seeking their love, I wasn't reciprocating that like back. And that's how a lot of my relationships, didn't why they didn't end well is because there was no equal reciprocity, there was no emotional intelligence, and there wasn't any conversation about how one is feeling.
I like what you said there. How we don't have the awareness, one, and we don't have the introspection at that moment, but it's because we don't emotional intelligence is great, I love it, like it's amazing. But I think the huge deal here is, for me personally, you can give me a take on this one. It's the reason why we're so in here. We can intellectualize a lot of the information of how we're feeling, but you can't think your way out of a feeling. You got to feel it. And this is why a lot of people that are codependent, the reason why we go back and do the same things, or even if we are in a conscious, authentic connection with somebody, right? Both of us doing the inner work, you still get triggered by that person and you still struggle in the healing journey when you don't learn to feel that pain again, of the abandonment, of the, you know, the hurt, of the shame, of the guilt, of the grief. You got to feel that within your body. Like when you are, before you act, before you're going to do anything, people go here. But if you were to come back into your body, and that's one thing I teach my clients, is don't think about the emotion. What sensation do you feel? Because a lot of the times when we get anxious and we get dysregulated or are living in survival, we go straight to thinking mode. We try to find a rational way to go about it. But what we need to do is just sit in that discomfort of the emotion. And you can either do breath work, you can do you can use a somatic tool to help you in that moment. But as time goes on, you got to get better and better at experiencing that emotion within the body, not within your mind, because people tend to think their way out. And now that I am in a, I thought that I was like, because I recently met somebody, and I told you this, Nick. I was like, I'm all healed because I went from codependent to hyper independent.
That's exactly what I did.
Yeah, so now that I'm meeting this person, we're both doing the inner work, and when I was manifesting, not manifesting in a sense, yeah, I got very clear with what I wanted, and I wanted this person to have emotional intelligence, to hold space for me, to feel my emotions, and show all sides of me, not just the great parts, right? The wounded parts of me as well. That I started to become aware that whenever he would vent his emotions to me, I would go to straight fix mode. Like I'll give him a solution to things. And he just wanted to be heard. He just wanted to be like for me to just listen. And I'm like, you want me to listen? You don't want a solution? You don't want me to like give you advice?
Yeah.
Because I didn't like the feeling of sitting with that discomfort of my emotions whenever he would say something to me. It felt uncomfortable. And that's a wounding of like the person that overshares or over asks or does something. Why are you uncomfortable with silence? Or the person that stays silent, right? Why are you uncomfortable not speaking up? That's a wounded part of us. So when you look at it that way, I'm like, man, there's a lot more work, because we can all do the healing journey on our own, and that's great, but there's a purpose to connections. We're here to do deeper work when we meet the person, for you to think like, okay, I'm going to meet this person, everything's going to be perfect, because that's what I thought. I overcame my codependency. I went alone. Like, you literally haven't dated in like a year and a half. Me too. I stopped the dating apps. I stopped messaging people online. Like, I literally was solo, avoiding everybody, because I needed that. I knew that if I wanted to change my life and get out of this attachment to people and things, I needed to be alone. I needed to face that discomfort of really feeling like I was the only person on this planet. And it helped me, right? But I think a huge thing, a huge takeaway from all of this, what truly helped me overcome codependency was truly being alone. Being alone and letting go of friends, family. And I'm not saying that this is what you should do, but this is what helped me, of letting go of anything or anybody, so nobody gets in my head and tells me what I should be doing with my life or their advice. I got to listen to myself. There was no little voice, me going to my friends and be like, so yeah, I broke up with my ex-husband and this is my life right now. I didn't need to hear any, because I didn't have that. So what really helped me find my way is like, when you shut the world out, you find the voice, the inner wisdom within you, and you allow that to lead you.
Well said. And I couldn't agree more. And I feel like this being alone for the past year and a half and being in this hermit mode has been, truly transformational for me. I've been an only child, so in a way, I feel like I've been alone, but I haven't because I've always seeked like out other friendships, relationships, anything I could do to not be alone, because I was an only child and I wanted that other emotional component and attachment to others. But this like time that I've spent like on my own for the past year and a half has really allowed me to tap into my own intuition and realize what's best for Nick. Because again, we are brought up in a society where we're told what's best for us. We're told that you need to be married by this age. We're told that you need to have this much amount of money in your bank account. We're told everything. And so, when do you have time to process what you're being told? Or are you just like, a robot and just taking instructions from others and just living out your life subconsciously? And that's what I feel was happening to me. And that all this pressure of what's being said to me, my own work, that just starts piling up on you, right? And then, you can burn out. So this time that I've spent alone, that self reflection, you can really start trusting what your intuition is telling you. You can start trusting that, hey, you know what? What's going on in my friends' relationships, and a lot of different types of infidelities or this, that, the other. That's not necessarily how life needs to be. That's not how relationships have to be, and only you'll know that when you do the work on your own. And then it's like you come back out with this foundation, with this inner knowledge and this inner guidance, and that is the most powerful thing you can possibly do for yourself. When you go in, do the work, you heal that pain, you look at that shadow side and you put light to it, and you make something beautiful from those wounds. Like, it just naturally occurs. So I agree. I think if you have a chance to spend time alone, 6 months, 9 months, even 3 months, I don't think there's a time limit for it, but I would
3 years.
I would think that, it takes time for your brain to unlearn things. Just by science alone, it takes almost not, anywhere from, 30 to 90 days to learn a new habit. So just imagine all the habits and things that you need to change, how long that's going to take.
No, I agree with what you said. It's very beautiful that you said something like, we're always being told what to do, and it stems since childhood. Like, um, I remember like, my autonomy was pretty much stripped because I was always told what to do. I wasn't given a choice. I wasn't ever asked if I wanted it. If I, it was kind of like, Michelle will clean your room. Michelle did this. Michelle did. I'm like, and after a while, like, I was just like, why are you push me around? Like, even my son would say that to me, like, why are you always boss me around? Because that's how we were conditioned, right? Like, I was conditioned that way as a child, and I was like, I'm doing the same thing here. I got to change this. So, a huge thing when it comes to healing, when it comes to going in this journey of like listening to ourselves, following our inner wisdom, our inner guidance, is a lot of people think, and there's a lot of coaches out there too, a lot of people that say, like, do this program and you're going to be healed and everything's going to be great and you're going to be healed forever. Like, everything's going to be good. But when it comes to healing, I don't think there's ever a destination. And you can't just, because if you do mindset work or affirmations or meditations or all of that, that, for example, me, I'm 30 years of operating a certain way, that I'm going to get better in 6 months or I'm going to get better in a year or two. No, like, that is, to me, it doesn't fit in my logical mind, because it's like, you can't just undo so much suppressed emotion, so many like situations in my life in a matter of 6 months. So it's really being patient, and it's really who you become in the process, not who I want to be in like 10 years from now. Yeah, I can have an idea of like, because you're creating yourself in the sense, but it's who I am today. Like, how did I show up today? Am I happy with my progress? Because a lot of codependent people carry a lot of shame, and to get out of that shame, you have to get out of survival, of the fight and flight, even freeze, fawn response, right? And you have to, the first thing is you have to de-shame yourself, which is becoming aware of the inner dialogue. And when you're healing, a lot of people kind of like, I should have done this and I should have done that. And like, you're very mean to yourself, and like, I need to be doing that. And I didn't get this done. And look at me, I'm gaining so much weight. Like, you're literally like are not helping yourself out of the hole that you are in. So when you do the de-shaming, which is the shadow work, um, and you regulate your nervous system, you can get out of there and then gradually start going. Because a huge thing about healing, it will look like you are going backwards. And the cure to your pain is your pain, right? Because people look at like, this is where I was and this is my glow up, and they're like, so you grew up from this healing journey? But I'm in my healing journey and I'm freaking fat. Like, I look bad. Why? Because like the the reality is that you get worse than where you're at, because you have to go back and feel the pain again to go forward in your life. So I think a huge I really like this topic because there's so much intricate details coming from the story of where I started. But the next episode is going to be what happened next after I let go of everything. Like, how did I really want to share what happened in the next episode after I left everything, and how was that lonely path? Because that lonely path was not sunshine and rainbows, it was brutal. So tune in to the next episode, and thank you guys for being here.